Hello, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Reanimator, one of my absolute favorite archetypes in all of Magic. There's just something about using my graveyard as a resource that just really speaks to me as a player, and it's gotten to the point where I've got 5 graveyard decks at the moment, and I've had to actively stop myself from building anymore. Now, in Magic, reanimation is predominantly seen as a black mechanic, and has been since Animate Dead was printed in Alpha. However, it's not the only color that does it. White's been doing reanimation for just as long. I mean, Resurrection was also part of Alpha. And though not as frequent or usually quite as powerful, White's also been getting reanimation pretty consistently over the years. It's actually at the point where you can legitimately build a mono-white reanimation deck if you really wanted to. And according to EDHREC, there's about 573 mono-white reanimation decks on their database. And as you've probably guessed by now, based on the title of the video and the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking about how to build Reanimator in EDH without using black. Blackless Reanimation comes in 2 main flavors, I find. Small creature reanimation, usually reviving something 3 mana value or less, and normal unconditional reanimation that almost always costs 4 or more mana. And while this does mean that you can't really do anything crazy like let's say turn 1 or 2 Balefire Dragon, it's still a consistent enough game plan, especially if you're spending your first few turns filling out your graveyard. Even though not having access to black in these decks means we can't really run cards like Entomb or Buried Alive, we still have plenty of ways to load up our graveyard. Predominantly in blue and green, we have Manifest Dread and a lot of self-mill cards. We also have access to draw spells with discard attached to them, most of which are red cards, kind of like Faithless Looting. But we also have cards like Careful Study, which is literally just blue Faithless Looting without flashback. And speaking of selective discard, you can also run various spell shapers like Greenseeker, which can net you some pretty decent benefits while you're loading your graveyard with your reanimation targets. And while not technically a spell shaper, Fauna Shaman can also do a really good job of loading up your graveyard if you decide to run green. And probably the most powerful card you can add in your deck if you decide to run red is Sneak Attack. This red enchantment allows you to spend 1 red to put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It'll gain haste. This is really good for lists that want to reanimate big, scary creatures, or if you're running a more combo-oriented version of Reanimator, you can use it to cheat in your combo pieces. And one of the most readily apparent benefits of running this card in a more combo-oriented list is that you can cheat the costs of some of your more expensive combo pieces. And there are some combos where the haste that the enchantment grants is relevant to the combo itself. So I highly recommend this card if you decide to run red. If you're going either combo or stompy, it doesn't really matter. It's good in any Reanimator deck. Oh, and thanks to Brothers War making Surveil Deciduous, we now have access to that in every color. And it's actually the mechanic I use to fill up my graveyard in my personal Blackless Reanimator deck. Now, probably the most important decision we can make for our deck is choosing the commander. There's a few ways to decide which one is right for us. And the first method is to pretty much just pick a commander that can do the reanimation themselves. However, in our colors, the pool for that is kinda small. Our only real options in these colors are the 9-cost mono white angel Rhea Dawnbringer, who in my opinion is much better in the 99 of a list than as the actual commander. The 7-cost mono white Bruna the Fading Light, Celestine the Living Saint, who reanimates based on the amount of life you've gained, Felden of the Third Path, who doesn't technically reanimate the creature itself, but makes a token copy of it, so kind of a pseudo-reanimator, and Duretti Scrap Savant, who is, in my opinion, probably the best of the 3, considering his +2 can get you some cards in your graveyard, and his -2 can get you some cards out of your graveyard. He's kind of an all-in-one package for Mono Red Reanimator. The second method, and in my opinion, generally the strongest method, is to just find a commander who can fill your graveyard for you. Plarg is a really good option for Boros, considering he lets you discard a card to draw a card, helping you get your big reanimation targets in. Plus, in some lists, the ability to pay 5 mana to flip cards from the top of your deck until you reveal a non-land, non-legendary 3 mana spell can be relevant. In Azorius, you could run Arcade Ganon, who lets you draw and discard a card, and you get a quest counter on him. Once during each of your turns, you can cast a human or artifact spell from your graveyard, with mana value equal to or less than the number of quest counters on him. Personally, with his second ability, I find that he would be a better commander for a more combo-oriented list, considering his second ability is a bit slow, and you'd mostly be playing smaller creatures most of the game off of his ability. You can also load up on a bunch of smaller utility creatures or hate bears, even some stacks pieces if you really wanted. He would be a pretty good commander for it, especially considering a lot of the good stacks pieces are kind of low mana value. Ivor Wolfkist in Naya is a really good option if you want to go the self-mill route. She also synergizes with sagas, which is really good considering 3 sagas in the game also have reanimation tacked onto them. Those cards being Elspeth Conquers Death, Tale of Tenuvial, and the Knight of the Doctor. Tokasia in Bant lets us use our untapped creatures to surveil one, which is really powerful, especially since she also gives them vigilance, which means that our huge creatures that we reanimate can pull double duty. I prefer to do it right before my turn, that way I can keep them up as blockers. And in my experience, this can result in a really full graveyard. And the last real method we have for choosing a commander here is to just jam the best creature in the colors you want in your command zone. This is especially true in Selesnya, Jeskai, and Inktreader. And while there are a lot of good commanders in these colors, in my opinion, the one with the most potential for a cool deck is Elsha of the Infinite, who can make all of our reanimation spells instant speed, so we can go more of a draw, go, control sort of reanimation hybrid build, which, I'm going to be honest, sounds really interesting and I kind of want to build it. So to close out the video, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the colors I didn't really mention before, like mono blue, mono green, Simic, Izzet, Gruul, and Temur. So fair warning, we're going to kind of get into a lot of thought experiment and theory crafting territory here on how we could possibly go about building in these colors. So with that out of the way, let's dive right in. So, of all the colors, mono green has the least viability for Reanimator in all of Magic. There's a lot of recursion, but not a lot of reanimation. So probably the best and most consistent way to go about it would be to just run 6, try to abuse the retrace ability, and run a bunch of cost reducers. That way you're not paying full price for a huge thing. Other than that, there's just playing Ghidorah and a bunch of creature tutors to get Hauntwood Shrieker every game. Which, if that sounds fun to you, by all means run that. That sounds really janky, and it would be really cool to see run, but it's a bit too jank for me. For mono blue, your only real option is just to run Emery Lurker of the Lock and go really all in on the commander and a bunch of protection and artifact cost reducers. It can work, it's just not as good as going mono red in my opinion. Though I will say that she does have 29 Reanimator decks in her name on EDHREC. I also just wanted to mention that I didn't really bring her up earlier because she doesn't really have enough support to be a full reanimation commander in the same capacity that Duretti, Felden, or Rhea do. Just in case anybody was wondering why she wasn't brought up earlier. Due to the abundance of creature tutors in green, I find that Gruul and Simic are going to run fairly similarly, where in Gruul they're going to be tutoring for a Felden of the Third Path, and in Simic they're going to be tutoring for Imri Lurker of the Loch. So the game plan would be very similar for both of them, considering they'd be more secret commander style decks. Izzet, on the other hand, is definitely going to lean heavily into artifact reanimation, considering they have access to Trash for Treasure, Scrap Mastery, Duretti Scrap Savant, Imri Lurker of the Loch, and Felden of the Third Path, in addition to cards like Mystical Tutor, Personal Tutor, and Solve the Equation to grab the previously mentioned sorcery spells, and a bunch of ways to recur them. And unsurprisingly, Temur is just going to be a mix of all of the previously mentioned ideas. There's not really much else to say about it. Thanks for watching! Do you have any Blackless Reanimator decks? If you do, please tell me about them in the comments. I would love to hear about them. And should I try to brew a Temur Reanimator build? Are you gonna try to build a Temur Reanimator build? Either way, I'd love to hear what you think about it. Also, my Tokasia deck is linked in the description below if you're interested. I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's day, and I hope to see y'all for the next one. Bye!